Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Culty News with Cults of Consciousness. And today I'm joined by the famous Eli Yoder. Thank you so much for joining us, Eli.
Well, hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me back on.
Yeah, and for those who are new to the channel or haven't seen Eli before, he is a very big voice in the ex-Amish space where he talks about all things Amish. He has his own YouTube channel, and everything is linked in the description below, so make sure you go over and subscribe to Eli for all of his funny reels. And we've done a few episodes together here as well. Oh, actually, I should link those in the description. Maybe we'll do that afterwards, where we go into depth about his own story, his childhood, and also what do we talk about? Sex education or the lack of sex education within the Amish communities, which is a very important topic. But today we are talking about, you've probably seen it on the news. A few of you guys actually sent me some of the articles. And then Jonathan, my husband, who is over here moderating, thank you, babe. He noticed that within these articles, the source was Eli. And we're like, oh my gosh, we need to talk to Eli. So, what the ramifications were of this national emergency alert test that we all got on our phones, kind of like an Amber Alert, very loud, very annoying. And it actually revealed some of these secret phones that were not supposed to be in these communities. So, we're going to talk about why that's a big deal, why it's not necessarily funny, although most people are painting it as such, and kind of the ramifications that go with being shunned for having such a device. So, Eli, do you want to start us off of what happened when people just started contacting you that day?
Yeah, there was several people that got a hold of me. Three of them in particular that pointed out that they had gotten in trouble for having their phone, and it never really actually crossed my mind. Me, I didn't even know how to get in my settings on my iPhone to try to silence all of those government alerts. So I even had to be showed how to do that. Then I was able to later, obviously, tell them and show them how to do that. But I was a little bit surprised at first because that's something that if I would have known about it and how that works and how even on silent it will go off, because mine was on silent
Mm,
and it went off. If I would have known and thought about that beforehand, I could have gave these individuals a heads up, because not just those three, but there was quite a bit of Amish over the last since about 2019 that had reached out from different communities, and some of those that are very strict and have rules that say you can't have a smartphone have reached out within those communities to ask for one. And when they do, I try to make that possible for them. But it
mm,
never really crossed my mind before the alert system went off that they could be in a situation around some of these elders that are very religious. And if they hear that go off, they're in big trouble. And it's very serious. They will get shunned. The one guy said you can get in his community at least 4 weeks of excommunication, like shunning, where like
whoa.
where you're isolated, you got to eat by yourself, you can't do business with other members. So it's actually, I mean, I know it sounds funny, the whole story, to a lot of people, but it's actually very serious in their religious group.
Yeah, and let's get into each of those specific points a little bit deeper. So, the first being why they can't have cell phones. So, can you talk just generally about, and I know every Amish community is different, and I'm sure you can speak to that as well, but as far as the rules around technology and modern day conveniences and how that's just not allowed in general?
Yeah, the technology's always been shunned by the old order. The Schwarzentuber Amish, they're usually the worst. They definitely believe you should never, ever have a smartphone. When those came out, they were already against the phones, but when those came
Mhm.
out, it was considered by my group as the mark of the beast. They would even tie it in with Revelation 13, where it talks about the mark of the beast system as a one world system. And they view this smartphone as such. So you can kind of see how serious that is for them. And that's why they have those kind of shunning guidelines in place for anybody that gets caught with it. Now, the flip phone, yes, that's still banned by the old order, but the flip phone is not quite considered as extreme as what a smartphone would be, because they did learn from their English people they do business with. They got taxi drivers that have these phones, and when they hear all that you can do with these, they definitely don't want their people to have that in their hands.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, and this is me speculating, has to do with information control because from the interviews I've done with you, and we're actually currently in a series of Amish videos right now on our channel, I've learned that the information control is very, very serious, where they're blacking out certain pages of books or gluing together parts of the dictionary, not allowing certain things to be taught in the Amish schools. And so, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, it's probably just because you have a wealth of information at your fingertips as far as a smartphone goes.
Yes, yeah, they obviously know. You can be very well educated with everything at your fingertips. I ran into a Amish man out of Indiana one morning. It was early in the morning. He was in his van with his construction group, and he recognized me, which was funny in the first place because I knew if he recognized me, you obviously saw my videos and you
Yeah,
saw me
which
on
is not
social
allowed.
media. And so he said something about to me that how wrong it is. He disagrees. And I said, that's fine. We can lovingly agree to disagree. And then he did mention that, well, you're using that smartphone, that's the mark of the beast and all of that. And I just brought right back and showed the hypocrisy. I said, so how do you recognize me? And he just kept right on walking. He didn't want to talk about it. So I knew that he had watched my videos, and that's why he kept
Yeah.
right on walking away. So
Yeah, it's like one of those things where when you're praying or someone's saying the prayer, I remember I used to do this as a kid and you'd open your eyes and see who else was looking and they're like, "I caught you." And I'm like, "Well, your eyes were open, obviously." To see that my eyes were
yes,
open. Yeah, it's
absolutely,
just
yeah. And even
one of
this
those
guy's
things.
young boys that were on a construction cruise, I could see when he walked inside with whatever he was going to get in the gas station, they were all excited. I saw them whispering and laughing and pointing at me and all of that, and I'm like, they also have phones. So I kind of look at it this way. Here's how I explain in my videos a lot: is drugs are illegal in America, but yet drugs are everywhere. In most Amish communities, smartphones are not allowed, but they're
Mhm.
everywhere. It's we're now in 2023. We're in a society now where this is a device that is almost impossible to keep out of their hands. Now, the one individual that I just made sure he got another phone that got caught during the alert system, he had to throw it down and splatter it on the concrete in front of the elders so they have proof it's gone, because they
No.
wanted to make sure nobody else gets their hand on that. So I'm going to make sure he gets another one, through probably the driver. I'll make sure he gets another one.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. So you have this platform because you were Amish, you know all the ins and outs of these communities, or at least the type that you were a part of and the people that you've interviewed and talked to. So you know that access to information, access to a phone is really important when it comes to educating these people and helping them get out of these situations if they choose to leave the Amish. Because I know you've said in the past, if you want to stay Amish, that's great. If you want to leave the Amish, I'm here to help. So let's talk about how you have actually been able to smuggle these phones into these communities to give people this access.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's not about forcing them to do anything they don't want to do. I've also gotten a lot of backlash on how I did some of these things. Here's the thing. I believe in being free to choose how you want to live. What really Thank God for America's Constitution. We have freedom of religion. You can be whatever religion you want. So I help those that reach out. If they ask for a phone, I help them get a phone. Now, if they don't want it, I don't force nothing on them. I have many Amish friends that are still in the community that are still currently Amish. I think the Amish lifestyle is great. If they want to remain Amish and they ask me for a phone, I make sure they get one. See, there's so much communication now with the online platform, social media, the smartphone. And little did I know when I first started that there would be that many Amish actually online and actually discover me on not only TikTok, but YouTube, Facebook, all across the board. They're discovering me, and they'll comment. Some of them, obviously you can expect how they would rather me not talk about their religion. So you got some of those, but then you have some that are like, wait a minute, I've been wanting to leave, and now I see this guy that's doing exactly that, and he could possibly help me escape to freedom the way he is. And I'm going to tell you right now, Shalise, that is what I enjoy the most, is when they reach out, sometimes entire families, and they want to secretly plan on escaping, just like I did 25 years ago this year.
Mhm.
And it's just, I love doing that because I know so many people, all thank God for technology. Again, the smartphone, I'm able to communicate with hundreds of former Amish, and there's so many construction crews out here. We can have them a job, we can have them a home, and we can have them on their feet and rolling, making money in the non-Amish world within 24 hours if they choose to do so. So that is really what I enjoy doing, is those that reach out that do want to come and live a different lifestyle, to help them succeed.
Yeah. And that's really amazing that you're able to provide those resources for people because it's scary. First of all, just to put everyone in the mindset, when you grow up Amish, and again, this is just from the interviews that I've conducted and the things that I have noticed, is you are so insulated in this community. You have very little access to the outside world. You sometimes you don't even leave the community, sometimes you can, and of course there's a wide variation of these groups and how strict they are depending on the bishops and the specific communities themselves, but when it comes to the mentality, normally what I've seen is that they really demonize the outside world and they make it this huge, scary place, and they don't teach you much about the outside world. So, within these interviews that I've been conducting, when people leave, they have no idea, like we talked about in yours, how to use a microwave. And you thought that you could turn a potato into pizza because they're just things that you don't know, or how to open a credit card, or how to do any of that stuff. It can be really, really scary and dangerous in some cases when you're trying to get out of a situation where this is the only thing you've ever known. Maybe you don't have any other resources or people on the outside who can help and guide you. And so just having access to a cell phone is such a huge step in just helping these people get to the place that they want to get to. So I'm curious, how do you actually physically get them these phones secretly?
Well, sometimes it's right to the driver. It's an easy way to do it. Most generally, they can get them phones themselves. They have so many different people they do business with outside the community. But some of them think it's cool to just reach out to this crazy ex-Amish they've been watching on videos and like, hey, let's see if he can get us a phone. So it's not necessarily they would have had, I was their only source to get the phone. So I want to point that out because there's ways they could have gotten it, but they think it's cool that this crazy Eli Yoder could get them a phone. So that's why I did a couple of them under a bridge. They gave me a location, like a crossroad, county road, and I was able to get drivers. And in a couple cases, I did it myself because it was within probably 2 hours of where I live at. But I also have such a great communication with all of the taxi drivers that are doing business with the Amish in many states and many different communities, where sometimes I can just make sure that they know about it and get the phone. And if they need money to get one, I'll make sure to get one. But plus, I have donated phones. I can take some of these donated phones, put them in the mail, and these taxi drivers can have them by the next day, overnight shipment, and have it in their hands within just days. So there's so
Mm,
many different avenues we're taking here. But it's not that I'm the only source. They could have gotten it through their drivers. They could even hire a driver if it's an old adult married man. He could say, "Hey, taxi driver, I'm gonna pay you today to go to Walmart. I'm gonna get me a prepaid phone card. I'm gonna get me one of them phones." They could easily do that, and some do that. But in when they ask about having me supply it, since I do have donated phones, it's my pleasure just to go down there. And if they give me an exact location where I can do so, just stuff it underneath a bridge. And if they give me some other landmark to where I can easily find it, I will make sure that I put it in a hidden spot where they can come back and grab it.
yeah. Okay, so real quick, I'm sure a lot of you guys have questions for Eli as well. If you do, drop them in the comments. Jonathan's starring questions as we go. Super chats are greatly appreciated and will be prioritized, but not necessary. So, Eli, how do you go about with these smart? Because they're expensive. I'm not gonna lie. As far as the phone is expensive, the plans can be expensive. How do you work it so they continuously pay the monthly bills? Do you set them
Before
up
I
with that, or is it under your name?
They are always prepaid phone cards, and they can renew those
Okay.
by through their neighbors or taxi drivers. It's always phone cards. They don't have a regular Verizon account like I would on this phone here because of their situation being secretive.
Yeah.
Always, every single one of them I've ever gave to the Amish people was always the prepaid phone cards that they have to renew every month. Now, they're
Okay.
obviously not cheap. So when I first started, before I had donated phones, I actually got a phone that cost me quite a bit of money. So I gave them the choice. Hey, I can buy one for you if you have the money to buy, whatever I pay for it, they can pay me back. So I did a few of those, but I noticed when my first ever TikTok video I did, I talked about how the money was in the bank. I got a lot of backlash for that. So I stopped even talking about the money aspect of it because there's always people that are going to be negative, obviously. Why would you rip them off and charge them off? Well, phones are not cheap. But now
Yeah.
I don't have to ask them for any money because I have, since I've been doing it publicly, so many people had phones laying around they didn't need, and they just came piling in like crazy. So now I probably for the next couple of years, I got free phones. I can just give them to them.
Oh, that's great. So, if people who are watching want to donate their cell phone. How do they get it to you?
Well, right now I got so many, I'm not taking any more donations. It's going to take forever to get through what I have, but I do have a ministry email on my TikTok. I was using that to communicate with people that want to donate and then give them through the email, my PO box, and then just boxes full of them started flowing in. And I got so many now. My wife's like, dude, you might want to cut this off. We got 100 phones here.
Wow. Well, that's great news that you have an outpouring of support and people that want to help. So let's get into the shunning part. So maybe if you could give us an overview as to all of the rules and things that apply when you are in the shunning.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the church. They're all different. They all have their ordinance with the rules, and they all have their own way of shunning and how strict they are on how many weeks maybe to apply to a certain thing that an individual has done. Like for the
Mhm.
one example that got caught, while they were there to confront him and ask him about a situation, when the phone went off in that ordinance, he would get 4 weeks at least in the shunning. While another kind of newer order Amish, where they don't allow phones and get busted, it may not even be any shunning, but it might be just a confrontation like, hey, we know you got caught with that. Don't do it again. It's like a verbal warning, if that makes
Mm.
sense. So they all have their own way of doing it. But if they do get shunned, let's talk about the shunning where if they enforce 4 weeks, that means that's very serious because those 4 weeks, they can't take food from the wife that prepared the meal. He can't take nothing from her hand, and he can't do no business during shunning period in the strict communities. So you're kind of isolated. You have to do your own thing. So that sucks. So over a smartphone, yeah, that I felt bad for that guy. It was. I know a lot of people thought, now this is just comedy and this is hilarious, but I do want people to understand in their lives, if you put yourself in their shoes, that's a 4 week period of going through a living hell, if you ask me. I mean, you have no
Mhm.
freedom. You're not getting any. You can't do no business. I mean, you're just being shunned, and then you have to go in church. You have to go and separate yourself. You can't be in there for the meetings with the elders. It's humiliating.
Yeah, and you also have to go in front of the congregation and talk about your sin, right?
Once that 4 weeks is up, if you've shown remorse and they're ready to vote on your forgiveness, then yes, you get down on your knees, depending on the church as well. Sometimes the bishop will read it out loud as your confession, but in other churches, they make you actually say it out loud where you confess it to the bishop. And once you confess that and you show remorse, and sometimes they show, shed a little tear, and they act like they're so sorry, that way they can be forgiven. But every vote has to be yes before you can be forgiven. If it's not, then the 4 weeks could turn into 6 weeks or more.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so difficult, especially when you think of something as simple to us as a cell phone, because we're all attached to our phones, right? We don't go
Yes.
anywhere without them. And so when you think about being punished for just having simple access to communication in the rest of the world, that just seems really harsh. Do you think that a lot of these people, especially the ones who contacted you, are going to continue to have their phone in secret once they've turned those alerts off?
Yeah, well, the three that I mentioned in the video they're pretty bold. They're known to just not really care. They're kind of like they remind me of my father. My father was shunned
Mm.
half the time I was growing up. He's like, "Oh well, I'm shunned anyway. Let's just go break some more rules." And he even drove a tractor, and drove a car, and got caught. And then he took me in an airplane ride and just kept breaking more rules. And
Yeah.
so it really didn't stop my dad. And these three individuals I mentioned, they're kind of remind me of my father. He's just kind of like, oh well, I'll go through the process, and they'll take me back into the church, and I'll just hide the phone better next time.
My gosh. Okay. All right, let's go to some of these questions that we have here. I really love okay, this one here. Fancy Nancy, how do they charge the phones? I saw another one. How do they charge the phones if they don't have electricity? That's a really, really great question.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were asking those questions. And one thing they have to realize, we just mentioned taxi drivers quite a bit. A lot of them leave them right in their work vehicle. They're taxi drivers. They plug them in their little
Mm,
chargers for them. Now, this particular individual that I snuck a phone to under the bridge, he was telling me how the neighbor, they're very good relationship with the English neighbors there, and they have a cord that they always leave plugged in behind the barn. They can either go inside the barn to do it or prop it up on a brick behind the barn, however they want to do it. But there's an access charged his phone daily. So when he got done every day after dark before he went to bed, he would go down there and he would use that available port to plug it in and leave it there in the English neighbor's barn. And then the next morning before he started his day, he'd go grab his phone again. So there's many different ways they can do this. I even had a portable charger that will last up to 8 hours that I gave a young man, and he is using this all day long if he needs it, and then he'll charge that at the English neighbor's garage. He said they allowed him to come in. So there's always friendly English people that have a close relationship with all of these Amish people, and they always make a way for them to charge them even if they don't have any other access. Now, some New Order Amish in northern Indiana have these solar panels, and most
Yeah.
of them, because they have some power source, it's much easier for them to plug it in right there at home and sneak it around at home.
Right. I was gonna say there's also those little camping things. I think my mom got us one that's like a little solar brick that you can charge your phone with. So I guess that would be an option too.
Yes.
Okay, let's see. Cat named M. How do women reach out? They're so much more controlled. Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question, but it's concerning mainly the older strict Amish, where they're more sheltered. They're in the house. They're not really out there like us men were to do business with outsiders and buy and sell and trade and do all the stuff that men do. So the women were always more in the house. They didn't get to really they sell some baked goods and some eggs, and there's English customers that come in. They have the opportunity to speak with them, and they could possibly plan an escape if they wanted to, but mom's always around, so it's much harder. Now, some of the newer order Amish that allow this Rumspringa season, almost 100% of them that leave the Amish is during that season when they get to go out and have, the opportunity to explore the world, Rumspringa. But unfortunately, the strict ones where I come from, I feel really, really bad. I've said this in videos before. I've only helped 2 women leave. I've helped more than 200 men leave. That shows you the strictness of the old order and Trooper Amish. If they don't have a sibling that has already left to come back and help them leave, they might be stuck because they just have no other way of leaving. I mean, for them to sneak around the phone in the house and mom and the whole family being in there, it's almost impossible.
Right. Yeah, we just interviewed someone from the Swords and Trooper Amish. And in fact, all of our interviews, aside from you, Eli, have been women. And so it's been really interesting to hear their perspectives and how much control there is within the communities. And even just once they escape, all of the difficulties they continue to face because of the way that they've been sheltered a little bit differently and more specifically than the men. Okay, Nicola, how does that work with the money? The men are the ones who make the money, right?
Yes, yeah, the men are always in charge of the money, the father of the household. My dad had to do all of the finances. He was in control of all the money. He made the money. My mom never went out of that home to do a job. The only money she helped make was selling eggs, selling baked goods. She put out a table in front of the highway there. And as a little Amish kid, me and my brothers and sisters would go out and we would sell with a little money box. And she made a little bit of money with that. But the men in the old order are the money makers. They're the ones that go out and make the money. The women, usually they're homemakers, whatever you want to call that. They do the gardening, they do the canning, they do all of the stuff, homemade clothing. So they don't really get out there to make a bunch of money. That's why the school teachers, I'll bring that up just because I remember how happy my school teacher, Sarah, was when she said, I'm making $1,000 a year to be a teacher. That was big money for her. And now after out here in the world, I'm like, wait a minute, that's like pocket change.
Wow. Oh my gosh, $1,000 a year. And someone just mentioned that they have to give the money to the man, right? As soon as they make it to the head of the household.
Not always. Some do. So it depends on the families. There's some that do that where they don't allow the women to have any money. But I know some of my aunts that had money separately from their husbands, but they were both in agreement with that. So there
Okay.
are some husbands that are very controlling, but that's not necessarily a church rule. That comes down to individual families. I mean, because it's kind of like any other culture. Sometimes you have a spouse that is very controlling more than the other and control them and not allow them to have any finances at all. But for the most
Mhm.
part, the women could have their own stack of cash and do business. Sometimes they get together and they make quilts. And when they sell these quilts, they can keep that money for themselves.
Okay, so it is possible. And actually, have you had any women reach out to you to ask for a cell phone?
There's only been 2 of them that have actually reached out through a driver. One of them requested a cell phone. If I have one, had a specific one that she would want to have. But usually it's very rare for the women to even request a cell phone. But some of them will already have them in some of these communities. And I'll get
Mhm.
messages like, hey, I love your content. I love your videos. Keep preaching the truth out of the Bible because it means a lot to me. I'll get messages like that. But those are the ones that already have been able to get their hands on a phone.
Okay. Okay, cool. So we're wrapping up here, guys. So if you have any more questions, put them in the comments below. But I just wanted to give an overall summary. So Eli, former Amish, has been helping get these cell phones into these communities where people have been asking for them. They want more access. They want, I don't know, maybe even more information, want to be able to have freedom to look through the internet and see what's out there outside of their communities. And when this national alert went off, they were exposed. In fact, before we go, I'm going to have you tell that story that was in the news article about the man who was kind of like a double whammy situation.
Yes, yeah. On that day when it went off, it was literally within an hour and a half, I'd say, that I had heard from all three. But the one that stood out was the one that said, hey, I had them coming in my driveway and they were going to confront me, with something they heard in the community, like they always do. They heard something, they have to come and they have to verify that. Because if he needs to be shunned, then they're going to let him know right then that, hey, that is shunning grounds, what you did. We're just here to check to see if it's true. And while they're asking him this, his phone just starts blaring in his pocket. And they were
Oh
like,
my gosh.
wait a minute, you got a phone? Okay, so now that's a double whammy. We're going to have to shun you for that as well. So it was really just bad timing.
That is awful timing, and I can imagine he's probably like, "Oh my gosh, this just like things keep stacking up." So, the point of this today was to illustrate how, yes, it may seem funny to outsiders and cell phones are not that big of a deal, but we wanted to illustrate the seriousness when someone is caught with a cell phone. Of course, we've already mentioned that it can vary from community to community because of how strict they are, whether it's old order or something that's a little bit more progressive. But there are consequences for something as simple as a cell phone, and we really wanted to dive into that today. So, a few more questions. Okay, kind of, sort of, in a way. Question, Eli, lots of Amish families have moved into my area. Is there a way I could make myself available to you if someone needs help here? Is there a way for me as a female to help if needed? I love that.
Yeah. There's a bunch of volunteers I have like that. My ministry email, eli.ministry.06@gmail.com. If you want to email and tell me your area, I have a whole list of people like yourself that I have on a list with your phone number, your address. And that's actually why I have successfully been able to help so many different Amish. If it comes to the phone or if it comes to wanting to escape the Amish religion, that's why all of those doors have opened up, is because of people that like her there that want to reach out and offer help if she's in an Amish community like that.
Hmm.
All of those resources are a great help. I mean, if she wants to reach out through the email, let me know all of that information. I'll put you right on the list. And guess what? Maybe the day comes where you can be used as a taxi driver and bring somebody to my area and put them on the job site and get them out of there.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so great. I'm gonna make sure if it's not in the description that we put that in the description afterwards. I don't know if we have that your email in there, so I'll make sure it is. Someone is asking, how can I donate cell phones? I think we mentioned earlier that Eli is to the brim with cell phones, so I think he's not accepting those at the time. But I'm sure that you will keep people updated on your page, Eli, if there ever comes a day when you run out of your 150 phones that you can ask for help. So, guys, if you haven't already, go make sure and you subscribe to Eli's channel, which is also linked in the description below. Okay, what else do we have? Any more questions? Oh, this is fun. I love when this happens, when two YouTubers I follow get together. It's my favorite thing. Me too. It's always a fun time talking to Eli. He always has so many great stories to share. Okay. Any other questions, babe? Emailing right now. That's
All right.
great.
Thank you very much. I will check out my emails and get back to you as soon as I can.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so I think that is all for today. Thank you so much, Krista. And thank you, Eli, for joining us on such short notice. We just reached out and we're like, hey, do you want to do this with us? And he's willing to come on, spend his time to chat with us today. So, again, go subscribe to Eli if you haven't already. And actually, make sure you watch the videos that we did on our channel together. They're Really, really great information on there. And anything that you want to add, Eli, before we go?
No, I basically just, if you guys are out there, and even just other cultures, it doesn't just have to be Amish. It just talk. If you start socializing with people and you start to get to know them, I love doing that, to try to get to know them a little bit and see what their lifestyle is and what they're going through. Sometimes just to encourage people, maybe they're going through something they don't quite understand, and you could give them those answers. But a lot of people just need encouraged, and there's so much we can do to help one another and love one another. There's people, we all go through different things, different levels, men, women, young, old. And I just always love to encourage people to be that resource for somebody that needs somebody to be a shoulder and an ear. Because my father, that's all he wanted, is be loved, and he didn't get that. So I always have this eagerness to help others and get to know their stories. So I don't care who they are, or maybe what they look like, or what kind of religious background. Just start a conversation with those kind of people, get to know them, and ask them how you can help them. I just love to hear people's stories like that.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I had someone, was it Mark, asked for a Linda Listen. We don't generally do them on the lives, but if you have a Linda Listen ready, Eli, I'd be happy to hear one. Sassy statement, if you guys don't know, or some inspiration for our viewers.
Stop listening to all those other voices around you. Figure out what you want, what makes you happy, what do you have in here, and don't change for others because of what they're telling you. Everybody wants to be accepted, everybody wants to be loved, and so many people will change who they are to be accepted and to be loved. But it's time that you be you. Don't change you to please others.
So good. Look at it. We just like pulled that out like no big deal. It was a Linda Listen. Stop listening to others and be you. So good. I love that. Okay, well, this has been awesome. Thank you again, and thank you to everyone who tuned in and watched. And if you're watching the replay, it would mean a lot if you could leave a comment and hit that like button to boost us out to more people. Subscribe to Eli. If you want to support this podcast, you can go to cultstoconsciousness.com. We got new merch. I think it's the first video I've ever worn our merch. We just got it in the mail. So if you want some shirts that have our logos on it, or I'm sorry for what I said when I was in a cult, or break the silence, break the cycle, Linda Listen, we got lots of good stuff over there. So check it out. And I think that's it. Until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.